Welcome to our next tutorial. In this lesson, we'll be creating an interior room. We'll be building on some of the skills that we've covered so far. In addition, we'll be learning to use the 3D warehouse where we'll be adding items to our model. We'll be learning a little bit of an improved workflow where we'll be using inferencing to move a little more quickly through modeling. We will also be learning some tools to do with changing our viewpoint and working with accurate modeling. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, here are the items we're covering: materials, guides, advanced inferencing, healing the surface, the 3D warehouse, and aligning groups accurately. A couple other things get covered as well, but for the most part, those are the items we need to know. Let's start a new file here. All right, once I have our new file, remember we're going to get rid of this guy and we're going to set this to be working in metric. So I'm going to go down to centimeters. I'm going to change this accuracy so that we're working in the same units that we have been using so far. Remember that a number of the tutorials you might find online will use the imperial system. So if you are following along with tutorials, you'll need to learn how that works. For now, we're going to start off with making a rectangle. Remember, we're going to start and put in a specific measurement. So we're going to go 5 meters, 6 meters to start. We're going to orbit our scene. We're then going to push pull this up 3 meters, 3M, enter. This is a box. I'm going to use the eraser tool to get rid of some of the lines that create this box so we can now see the inside of that box. You'll notice that the inside is a slightly different color. This is gray on the outside and it's a bluish gray on the inside. That doesn't make a difference on this particular model that we're creating. It's just a way to indicate that you're inside, or you're seeing in the inner surface of your object. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to work with guides. To create a guide, I'm going to click once and then click a second time, which will set a guide at a given distance. If I want to be specific with the distance that I'm creating, I click once to start. And as we have previously, I'm going to hit 1 meter and hit enter. And that's going to create a 1 meter distance between where I first started my click and my second. That gives me 1 meter from here. I can do the same thing on this side by clicking, typing 1 meter and hitting enter. That's now 1 meter from each edge. I'm going to add a additional guide from the top, which is going to be 45 centimeters from the top, and from the bottom, we're going to have one that is 60 centimeters. Now I'm going to create some boxes over these shapes. Go to my rectangle tool. I'm going to put a box here. I'm being very careful to start at the intersection of these lines. And again, carefully making sure that you're starting and finishing at the intersection points. It's hard to see where these boxes are because we've got guides over top of them. So what we're going to do is now erase our guides. You have two ways to do that. You can use the eraser tool, which will click and delete any guides. Or if you go here in your menu on the right side here, click on display and click delete all guides. It will delete any guides in your model. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to push pull some of these boxes into 3D space. I'm going to push pull each of these boxes out 60 centimeters and 45 centimeters each. So we'll start here, start moving this and type in 60 centimeters, enter. And then with this smaller box, I'm going to push pull that out 45 centimeters and hit enter. I'm going to do the same with this, but I want it to match the same distance out as this without having to type 45 centimeters for each of these 4 boxes. So what I can do is start the push-pull motion and then bring my cursor over top of the object that I want to match the face with. And what you'll see is it snaps to that distance. Okay, we're inferencing how far I want this to go. So that's the same 45. I can do the same thing here. Push-pull. If I go to this, it's going to go the 60 centimeters. And if I go here, it's going to go 45. Same with this one here. So now we all of these are now 45 centimeters from the back surface. Okay, we're happy with that. The next thing we're going to do is clean up just some of our extra edges. It's good modeling technique to delete any of these extra pieces of geometry. We call that healing the surface, and we just use our eraser tool to do that. I'm going to erase that and erase that. And remember now, I've also got some other faces on the other side of this shape. If I zoom in here, it's a little tricky to get in and see this without going through and breaking through to the other side of this wall. So we're going to just change our view. To do that, I'm going to change the viewing angle using the zoom tool. Notice in the measurements box down here, when I click on the magnifying glass, the zoom tool, it shows me a number that's 35 degrees. This is your viewing angle, and it relates almost to the same way a camera has. It relates in the same way a camera has different lenses, which can zoom in or out, giving you a wider angle of view. If I have this tool selected and I type in 50 and hit enter, you'll see it changed my view from 35 to 50 degrees, which gives me just a little bit more ability to orbit around and see in this space. If I go to my orbit tool, okay, and I move, I have a little bit more. I can get in here close and I can see a little bit more than I did before because I've got a better viewing angle. If I really want to, I can go and make this a larger number, select this, type in 75, and it gives me an even wider angle. And this is going to distort your view a little bit. What you're going to be seeing here is a very, very wide angle view. Okay, so you get a bit of distortion as you do that. We're going to set that back to 35 to the original viewing, and that's going to look like normal again. Okay, so remember, have this tool selected, hit your angle, your viewing angle, and then orbit in to see where you want it to have access to. I'm going to hit E for eraser and get rid of that line. I'm going to do the same thing on the top here and erase that away. Okay, orbit back out, and we're back to where we want. I'm going to hit C on my keyboard to go to my zoom tool and type in 35 to return to my regular viewing angle. The next item we're going to do is we're going to start to create some guides to create some windows along the side of this wall. We want our guides to match up with the other existing geometry. Starting from the top, I'm going to drag down until I inference this point here. Now notice as I get close to this, if I get close enough to one of these edges, it's going to snap into position. That's what I want. I do the same thing from here, drag down, snap to this edge, and I'm going to have my height matching the existing geometry. I want to have another guide from here out in this direction, which is going to be 1.5 meters. I'm going to create another guide 1 meter from the first one, 1 meter, enter. This is going to be the size of my window. To create it, I'm going to go to my rectangle tool and draw a rectangle that fits this size. I'm going to have 2 more of these windows, so I'm going to go ahead and make my additional guides. This is going to be 45 centimeters, enter. This is going to be a meter again, 1 meter, 45 centimeters, 1 meter. Okay, so there's our 3 windows. I'm going to take my selection tool, click on this rectangle, and I'm going to move it to duplicate this object 2 more times. If I change to my move tool and I start moving this, it's going to move in the direction that I select. To get this to move in a predictable way and an accurate way, I want to pick it up from a corner or an end point that's going to snap to one of these guides. If I pick it up arbitrarily anywhere in the middle here, when I try to snap it into position, it's not actually snapping the way I want it to. So I'm going to hit escape, and this time I'm going to pick it up from this end point. As I start to drag, you'll notice it now snaps to any of the guides that I've created. It's also moving my original. So I'm going to tap on a Mac, I'm going to tap the Option key. On a PC, I believe it's Control. And when I do, it makes a duplicate of the original. So now if I click and drag here, I have my original still here, and my second copy is here. Again, I'm going to click and drag, tap Option on my keyboard, and snap this to here. I just click back to my selection tool, and you can see that these original boxes are still here. I'm going to clear my guides because I don't need them again. And now you can see more clearly that these windows are here. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to, with our existing windows, add a little bit of detail. Let's zoom into one of these windows, and we're going to add some detail using the offset tool. The offset tool, it can be found in your recent tools or potentially in your large menu set. Offset looks like this, or you can hit F on your keyboard. With my selection tool active, I'm going to click on the box that I created and then use the offset tool to drag a copy of the exterior lines. And I'm going to offset this edge by 10 centimeters. And then I'm going to click again and offset it by 13 centimeters, which will bring it just 3 centimeters inside my first line. I'm going to switch to my line tool, select the midpoint, and make 2 crossing lines from each midpoint to the opposite midpoint. I'm going to select the box that I just created, and I'm going to use the offset tool to offset this box by 3 centimeters. Once I've done that with one of these boxes, I can do the same thing to each of the others. So if I hit select on my keyboard to make my selection tool active, I click in this box and then switch back to my offset tool and double click. It'll make the same offset as the last one I did. I can do the same in each of these, switching back to offset and double clicking. I'm hitting the space bar on my keyboard to switch tools, switching back to F for offset and double clicking in the box, which is repeating the same sizing for each of my boxes. I'm going to zoom in here and use my eraser tool to erase the extra lines that I don't need here, 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 and here. And then I'm going to use my push-pull tool to push back each of these boxes. I can push-pull in the same way I did with the offset tool by double-clicking here, and it will repeat the same depth for each of these based on my last chosen push-pull distance. The last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to push-pull my border back a little bit here to create a little bit of interest in my window. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to make a couple of additional windows by following some of the same tools we just did. I want to recreate this window to match exactly the dimensions that I used previously. I can use my offset tool to offset this window and match it in the same plane to any object that's already in my model. So I'm going to match it to the outer edge of this. Then I'm going to offset this to match the inner edge here. I'm going to use my line tool again to create lines that intersect my boxes from the midpoint to the opposing midpoint. I'm then going to use offset to offset each of these boxes the same distance I did previously. And then I'll use spacebar to select and F to double click, spacebar to select, F to double click, and repeat this until I've made all of my rectangles. Finally, I'm going to select this box and use push-pull, P on my keyboard, to push-pull this box in the same distance as my previous boxes. And to do that, I'm going to inference the other window and get the exact measurement. Once I'm done with that, then I'm going to erase my intersecting lines and use push-pull to push-pull this window mullion back in line with the previous measurements I made over here. Once I've started using push-pull, I can actually orbit without changing my tool if I'm using my middle mouse button, which is what I'm doing here. Once you're happy with this, you can practice these skills and create a third window matching your first two. Next, we're going to add color to our model. To do this, we're going to return to the menu on the right. We're going to close any open windows, and we're going to open up the materials inspector. This might look different on a Mac or a PC, but it should be quite similar. What you'll notice here are you have a number of available options. Each of these has a drop-down, which will give you more detail under each. For now, we're going to go to colors. We're going to go to a light blue to fill in our windows. I'm going to select a pale yellow to fill the color of my wall. And then I'm going to pick a light pink color, just so you can see what happens. I'm going to hold Option on my keyboard, and you'll see that I get these 3 boxes next to my paint bucket. When I click, it is going to fill in all connected geometry that is the same color. It stops at the blue and it stops at the yellow because these are not the same color. It was limited to what was the same color. I'm going to pick a less obnoxious color like this, and I'm going to do the same thing and fill all of that in with gray. I'll do the same thing here and here to fill in my window frames. Next, I'm going to pick another yellow and fill in my back wall, and then perhaps fill in some more object details here, remembering to fill in any undersides or hidden geometry as you go. Once we're done with this, we're going to add in a material. Materials are similar to colors, except that they have some more controls that we will cover in a later tutorial. I'm going to just go to the wood drop down here. I'm going to select one of the wood options and click to add a floor. Next, we're going to open up the 3D warehouse, where we'll add a couple of pieces of furniture. The 3D warehouse is full of objects that have been created by others, which you can then import into your model. There are thousands, so you may want to be a bit more specific. Rather than simply a chair, I'm going to add leather, which will narrow down my results a little bit. And I'm going to click on this object and download, and then it'll drop into your model. Once you drop this chair into your model, you'll see that it's treated a little bit differently. This object has been grouped. We'll learn about groups in the next tutorial, but for now, let's just learn how to modify this. This blue box around the chair is called the gizmo. When I put my cursor over top of the gizmo, I can move the object, or I can put my cursor over these small red plus icons and rotate in any direction. If I want to rotate freely, I move my cursor away from the object. If I get closer to the small protractor, the object will rotate in 15-degree increments. I can also move my object by clicking and dragging the object around my scene. But notice when I do, you'll see that sometimes my object moves in unpredictable ways. Right now, the object is buried in the floor. To avoid this, be sure to pick up your object from a point on the object that should touch the floor. I'm going to pick up the chair from the bottom point and drag that until it snaps to the floor. Once it does, as you move, you can see that this is now touching the bottom edge of the floor. Because the floor has no width, you can see it coming through the object. That's fine. I'm going to make a duplicate of my chair by clicking and dragging and then tapping Option on my keyboard so I have an additional chair. I will then rotate each chair and add in a glass table. This glass table is quite large, so I'm going to scale it down by using the Scale tool, which is in your toolbox. I have the option of maintaining the aspect ratio or squishing my object. I don't want that, so what I'm going to do is pick it up from a corner. As long as I pick it up from a corner, it will maintain its scale and ratio. Once I'm happy with my object, I'm going to zoom out, change to my Move tool, and rotate my table. Finally, orbit your scene to make sure that nothing is coming through your floor, and fix anything that is further down than it should be to ensure that everything is on the correct plane. Once you've completed your model, create your image, save your SketchUp file, and submit your work to the Brightspace Dropbox. Good luck.